Sure, I'm happy to be corrected by Ben on the fly, if that's all right. But look, our team is doing the modelling now in terms of that demographic analysis, historical arrangements, sibling rights and that sort of stuff, but we haven't finalised it yet to put it to the Minister or to the Government. As the Minister said, the modelling doesn't impact the shared CBD zone, but it would impact the zones of historical and North Murray Alder and also Charles Campbell. But we're just trying to work through that at the moment. So is it far off, Ben?
No, it shouldn't be too far. Another month or so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr Pearce. Same budget line. Are there any business cases which have been undertaken or are currently underway for any other new schools, new government schools in South Australia?
I'll invite Rick to answer.
In the strict definition of a business case, no, but there certainly is a preparatory work. So the evidence I gave at the Budget and Finance Committee remains true. We're doing all of the analysis about demographic analysis and historical analysis and sibling rights modelling for that. As was reported in the paper, we were experiencing a lot of demand for our shared CBD zones, and some of that was coming out of that inner kind of northeast area, which was reported in the advertiser. But at this stage, we're still gathering all of those data points before we proposed back through the Minister to undertake a business case.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Mr Pearce. So just to clarify on that, so if I recall the evidence you gave at Budget and Finance Committee meeting, you might have discussed the inner north or the Prospect area and preparatory work being done there, and I think you might have just mentioned the northeast as well. So is there, happy to be corrected on that? Yeah. Are there other areas?
Same reference point. So we're just, because of the urban infill that's underway through Prospect right round through to Bowden and other areas, that's why we're really trying to get this modelling right using data from other sources, including other government agencies. But certainly Prospect was one of the suburbs that was driving a fair bit of demand, and it's largely due to the changing nature of the historic big blocks that are being subdivided into two-storey, four-bedroom houses moving in and more kids.
Thank you, Chair. So just, I guess, in reference to that answer, when do you anticipate, Minister or Mr Pearce, the preparatory works for that location or those locations to be complete and the public being made aware of any plans to expand existing schools or build new schools in those pressure points as you refer to them?
The information about pressure points is constantly being updated by the Department for Education. One of the key points at which information comes in, of course, is through the Year 6-7 and Year 7-8 transition process that's underway at the moment, which will help provide us with up-to-date information. Obviously, enrolments in primary schools, the public systems around the Adelaide in particular, but also in some regional areas, are informative. And so it's not just in relation to the CBD or inner north where this is an issue. Of course, there are areas of capacity pressure elsewhere in the city, elsewhere in the state, and the department is constantly updating advice. And when they provide that advice to me and the government, we'll obviously look to endeavour to respond to that in a suitable way, as we have done since we've been in government, and keep the public informed along the way.
Thank you, Minister. Are there any preparatory works underway or business cases or whatever you would like to call them in country areas for new schools?
I'd refer to my immediate last answer. There's obviously particular pressure spots in the city, but that's not to say that there aren't some regional areas that are experiencing population growth. We're also underway currently in significant new works in Whyalla. We have significant development underway at Berry, the Glossop High School site at Berry, and indeed there are expansions currently underway in Murray Bridge, Mount Barker, There's improvements going on from the APY lands in the northwest of the state to the Mount Gambier in the southeast. We've got a new public school opening in Goolwa next year, a new public school opening in Whyalla next year, in Angle Vale, and while it's on the metropolitan area edge, Aldinga as well. So we'll continue to keep an eye on those capacity pressures in different parts of the metropolitan area, different parts of the country, and indeed on the city fringe where we have new schools being built at right now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. Same budget reference, but a slightly different topic. So in terms of the transition of Year 7 into high school and the need to have teachers in those high school settings teaching Year 7 classes, how many of the positions that needed to be filled have been filled for next year?
You've asked me a question that I believe I have some information right at the very, very, very back of my folder. And Mr. Pearce has retrieved it first, so I have to push this back to the beginning now. So, so the department's updated me as at yesterday with the status of the recruitment process. This is obviously work that's ongoing because indeed some of the people winning permanent positions that have been advertised are contract teachers at the moment. So then their contract position may potentially also need to be advertised in the coming months potentially. So it's updated every week as depending on who wins positions. I am able to advise that we are on track to have at least 800 additional teaching positions in high schools, and we are filling more than 1,000 teaching positions in high schools, noting, of course, that some of these are impacted by retirements of existing workforce as well. So far, for 2022, I'm advised that the schools have declared 829 ongoing high school vacancies, of which 734 have been filled through teacher placement, recruitment of permanent primary teachers into secondary roles, and an open recruitment process. I'm advised that sites are continuing to finalise appointments through Phase 2 recruitment ahead of Phase 3 recruitment. I understand that schools will update their workforce profiles in the coming weeks as student enrolments and subject preferences for 2022 are confirmed. Following this, the next phase of recruitment to ongoing roles will start from next Monday. That's week 3 of term 3, and will include vacancies related to updated workforce profiles and replacements where teachers have won roles in phase 2. That's that cohort of teachers I was describing before. Also, of course, a number of primary teachers moving to secondary sites as well by their choice. I'm also advised that schools will have contract positions to fill, and this will occur in term 4. In addition to Year 7 to high school related recruitment and indeed the growth in capacity in schools that we described earlier because of the growing population in some areas, the usual filling of vacancies due to staff movements will continue as the need arises. This occurs for reasons such as backfilling teachers on maternity leave, temporary changes in time, and to accommodate for student subject selections and to replace teachers who win leadership positions. The department's advised that through these recruitment processes, it received more than 14,500... Let me say that again. The department's advised that through these recruitment processes, it received more than 14,500 applications from more than 2,400 individuals. This provided a strong candidate field from which sites could appoint teachers, and as I said earlier, I'm advised that the 733 vacancies have been filled to date. That includes 109 primary teachers who were appointed in Phase 1 recruitment. That was the group last year. Permanent primary teachers moving to become permanent secondary teachers. It includes 156 secondary teachers appointed via industrial placement processes. And the member may recall, we've discussed this before, these are teachers who would often, who have placement rights, experienced teachers in many cases, sometimes absolutely excellent, outstanding teachers, but who may have become extra to the school where they have been placed or other circumstances. They may have done their time in the country and come back with that placement right to get placed in a city school, as is their industrial entitlement. And so those teachers historically have often been placed during term 4 or the summer holidays, or even the week before school starts in the school that they're going to go to. This year, they've known in term 2 2021 where they're going to be in term 1 2022, which is an absolutely outstanding outcome for those teachers and for the schools. It gives a high level of confidence that they're going to be placed in schools that we're very excited to have them, because they've been chosen for their merits based on what they've put forward. So that's good news. And there's also the 469 teachers, secondary teachers appointed through phase 2 recruitment so far. That includes teachers who are secondary teachers currently employed by the department in existing permanent or temporary roles but going to new permanent roles. It includes primary teachers employed by the department in both permanent and temporary roles. It includes SSOs employed by the department who hold teaching qualifications. So a very exciting opportunity for those SSOs to become teachers, and indeed obviously in some cases their SSO role may need to be filled. It includes teachers moving to the public system from the private sector, and it includes new graduates. I've inquired with the department about any vacancies which didn't receive applications, and I was informed that of the 550 odd roles, I think there were 6 roles in this category. The department expected, as always, that there will be a number of harder to fill roles. These are often with a very specific subset of teaching field that were sought, and I think all but one of them may be in remote locations. And the department will deploy its normal strategies to support these sites. 5 of these roles have been referred to the Pilot for Teach for Australia program, which is focused on specialist teaching in country locations that haven't been able to attract applicants for a number of years. And we already have the first group of those pilot teachers operating in Roxby Downs and Whyalla, 2 STEM teachers in Roxby Downs and a music teacher in Whyalla. And I can tell you the feedback from those schools, the feedback from those sites is that those Teach for Australia associates are doing a fantastic job, and those principals are very excited about them. So I'm sure that should we be able to utilise that project to fill those 5 roles, we'll similarly do very well. But the department has other strategies if necessary.
Just to follow on from the Minister's answer. Thank you. In relation to primary schools, what is the expected flow-on impact to primary schools programs and also class sizes as a result of that transition?
Well, class sizes aren't necessarily to be impacted. There's a set of rules in relation to class sizes that don't change. As I think I've reported to previous estimates hearings and elsewhere, in addition to the initial planning suggested we need 800 extra secondary teachers and 500 fewer primary teachers as a system. So as at Tuesday this week, the reduction of primary teachers that's been required has been managed by, so far already, 109 primary teachers being appointed to high schools through that phase 1 recruitment. These are permanent primary school teachers becoming permanent secondary teachers. There are another 73 primary teachers who've been appointed through phase 2 recruitment. Pardon me, and that included high schools and also vacancies in the new schools. And then there's also a very significant level of natural attrition. We're talking about a staff cohort of 30,000 across the Department for Education. So we're confident that we will be no need to... There's always some very limited need to move permanent teachers between metropolitan sites as populations grow and populations diminish, and there will be a limited need for that. There'll be a reduction in the numbers of contract teaching roles in primary settings needed in 2022 compared to 2021, but that... Obviously, the department advises me that that's anticipated to be limited, and indeed we're getting a lot of contract primary teachers interested in moving to secondary settings. Yep. So there are hundreds and hundreds of primary teachers that have already expressed interest in moving to secondary schools. There's been nearly 200 already appointed, and natural attrition will actually get us a long way there to the others, but you know, that doesn't mean that there won't be further primary vacancies still to be advertised that are available for new graduates or for contract primary teachers able to move to ongoing roles. There are some primary vacancies, in fact, that are being advertised next Monday week 3 of term 3. Classroom teaching positions will be advertised for country locations, as well as a small number of specialist areas in metropolitan schools, like language teachers. And at this stage, the department is expecting fewer than 50 primary vacancies.
That wasn't my question. My question was on the impact to primary schools as a result of this transition, so to the primary school programs and so on. But I'm happy to take that on notice, because I know we've got to get through a lot of questions.
As to read the Hansard, you'll find that I answered that question directly. There's no change in class sizes. There's 500 fewer primary teachers.
Programs.
That is the impact of what we're talking about.
Programs in schools specifically.
So, well, the answer to the question is that our schools will offer excellent programs. They'll no longer be offering those programs to Year 7s.
I'll move to my right, the member for Newland.
My question relates to Budget Paper 4, Volume 1, page 177, and it follows on from my earlier question about support for students with a disability. Can the Minister please advise whether the government is looking to increase the provision of special options for students who need them?
So thank you, Member, and this is an important area of work, and the government has announced significant funding over the last 3.5 years to increase special options in our schools and indeed in a number of our sites that have special classes or disability units. A number of those have already taken place, and with the transition of Year 7 into high school next year, there are more that have already been announced and already planned, and I'm really pleased to be able to advise the member and the House and the community that we're adding 6 further special options, 6 additional special options classes in 6 government schools for the 2022 school year to ensure we can best support students with a disability in the setting that is most appropriate to support their needs. These are, in addition to the 15 new classes announced at 11 schools in 2020 as part of our $10.3 million capital works commitment to deliver 180 special options places by 2022 for the transition of Year 7 to high school. So in addition to those 15 new classes already announced, this is a further 6 new special classes. In Adelaide's north and south, the schools were identified based on where there is most demand to ensure students are offered a place closest to home. The schools are Golden Grove High School, Hamilton Secondary College, Para Hills High School, Ranella East College, Riverbanks College Beta 12 and Salisbury High School. So the modification to facilities will commence promptly in line with the statewide move of Year 7 to high school in Term 1 next year. The special options class at the new Riverbanks College Beta 12 is in addition to the 100 inclusive places for students with a disability that have previously been announced at that site. As we prepare for Year 7 to move into high school, we're going to continue to meet the demands for students with a disability to be enrolled in a special class if that's what's suited to their learning needs. We are going to spend the money to do what it takes to support students in the environment that best fits their needs. These additional places mean students will have the right support where they need it most so that they get the most out of their schooling, so they get a year's growth in their education every year, so we're able to best support them to fulfil their potential in their education and in life. We aim to provide an inclusive education environment for as many students as is possible, and our investment in targeted support will improve learning outcomes for every student in every classroom. Members may be aware special options provide an alternative learning environment to a mainstream classroom. It could mean a special class, which is pretty well integrated into a mainstream school. It could mean a disability unit, which is a special unit within a mainstream school for students who need a higher level of adjustment to the curriculum, often potentially may have physical needs as well. And indeed, we have special schools, which are separate from mainstream schools, but they cater to a similar cohort of students who are in those disability units. So the announcement that I'm making in answer to the member's question is specifically in relation to that group of special classes that are in mainstream schools. They provide adjustment to curriculum as is necessary for students with a diagnosed disability, global developmental delay or other neurodevelopmental or physical disability associated with a developmental delay. Eligibility and suitability for a special option is, as always, determined by a Department for Education psychologist.
Member for Wright.
Budget Paper 4, Volume 1, page 185 under highlights. How many times have sniffer dogs been used in public schools in the last financial year?
I'd have to check on when the first time it was used. Certainly this year there's been one occasion. The total number has been 2.
Thank you, Minister. And of those 2 sites, how many requests came from the individual schools? Was it in both cases, or was the request or direction, I guess, made from elsewhere?
To be clear, the election commitment identified that we would establish protocols within which school visits that were not part of a police operation could take place, and those protocols have been followed on both occasions. Those protocols involve the school being the instigator of the request, and the discussion then happens with the relevant officers in the department, and then through the Chief Executive would get progressed to SA Police.
Thank you, Minister. Same budget line. Were there any requests made by schools that weren't granted in the last financial year?
Rather than saying weren't granted, I would say weren't yet granted.
So, on how many occasions was that, Minister? Or how many different schools have either been not granted or not yet granted who have requested sniffer dogs in their schools?
I would say that there are several that are under active consideration. That doesn't mean that there aren't a number that are at an earlier stage in the development, but the active consideration, there's a number of things that the Chief Executive, I'm sure, would want to be assured of before a request would go to police. I know that there was one circumstance last year where there was an operation that was, I think, ready to take place. But there were some COVID-related issues at the school which meant that it had to be deferred. And indeed, while we are limiting the number of adults on school sites, while we're preventing parents from being able to enter their own school site in many occasions right now in order to enable us to reopen schools in line with the SA health requirements, there's obviously a priority that gets considered in relation to whether this is the right time to run that, what is in effect a part of their drug education program. There are other aspects of our drug education program, including work that's done in the classrooms that's able to be unimpeded without even raising the question of whether visitors come on site. So this is an important body of work. It's a body of work that will continue. I anticipate that it's going to be received positively by schools who integrate one of these visits into their drug education program, as I understand it has been so far by the schools that have taken the opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, when you say several, are we talking more than 5? Fewer than 5?
I think I've got about 4 on the list in front of me that would be ready for the CE to give consideration to when the time is right.
Thank you, Minister. And of those 4, were any of the requests made by the schools in that group of 4 made in the last calendar year?
Look, I don't have that level of detail, and I'll take it on notice on the off chance that there's information that is usefully able to be supplied.
Thanks, Chair. So just to check, you'll take on notice whether any of the 4 schools who are not yet had their request granted made that request in the 2020 calendar year as opposed to the 2021 calendar year.
Well, I've already taken that on notice. I'd make the point that obviously as the circumstances we have right now where parents aren't allowed onto most campuses, for most children certainly, that was a situation that was in place for much of last year as well. And we were discouraging visitors to be on site in order to best meet our opportunities to provide as COVID-safe an environment as was possible, and that has impacted on the opportunity for this program to be delivered. It's impacted on, obviously, as I think the Chief Executive has said, his willingness to put forward an operation to SA Police in that environment when we're not allowing visitors on school sites. We look forward to when many programs that run as usual in our schools can resume, and this is obviously an important program that is one of those programs which will be easier to conduct when we are more encouraging of people coming onto our school sites than the current COVID conditions allow.
Thank you, Minister. On to page 106 of the same budget paper in regards to vocational vocational education and training. Since the change with the flexible industry pathways, are there any vet facilities in any of the government schools? For instance, it might be cooking, commercial baking, any of that kind of stuff, which are no longer used because they may not fit within those flexible industry pathways.
I have. I note that the full extent of the changes in flexible industry pathways isn't actually until next year. I note that there are some vocational education facilities that have been developed over the years that long before we came to power ceased being used for their original intended purpose because, of course, some vocational pathways cease to be as important, or there might not be as much industry engagement as was initially hoped when they might have been envisaged. I'm familiar with some, or at least I'm sure I've been to schools where people have described several years prior to the election since, you know, some of those facilities have been used in certain examples. However, in relation to the impact of the flexible industry pathways, the information that I have is that we've got 26 flexible industry pathways. They map out a student's journey through secondary school to employment. They articulate the qualifications, training and skills required. They prepare students for the workforce. They've been endorsed by the Training and Skills Commission's Industry Skills Councils as the qualifications suitable for school students, leading to real entry job outcomes. The courses are funded through the Department for Innovation and Skills. FIPS may include qualifications at Cert 2 or Cert 3 level, depending on the needs of employers. They're delivered by an RTO. They include enterprise and employability skills through SACE and specific industry work requirements linked to the pathway, whether that's white cards or working with children checks. They include compulsory SACE subjects and contextualised delivery of other school subjects so that students can complete both a VET qualification and their SACE concurrently. Most government secondary schools are proposing to offer at least one flexible industry pathway in 2022, some more. And indeed, it's worth noting that flexible industry pathways aren't the only ways in which schools and government schools are offering vocational education training. It's what we call stackable VET, or VET clusters that may involve portions of training that are delivered, that deliver many courses that people will be interested in doing, and which will also count towards SACE credits. And I think that the SACE board is currently finalising or has recently finalised the application of how many credits each of those proposed clusters will attain. And if schools haven't got that information this week for their course planning for next year, I think they'll have it in the next week or so.